Members, it's time for questions to the Executive Office. I will start with listed questions, and question 13 has been withdrawn. I call Owen Tennyson.
Question number 1, Principal Deputy Speaker.
Principal Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 1 and 10 together. The delivery of the strategic framework to end violence against women and girls requires a whole-of-society approach. We've engaged with Ofcom on online safety and mobilised work across all councils through our Change Fund. The Online Self-Safety Act of 2023 introduced new UK-wide laws that protect both children and adults from online harm and place specific obligations on online service providers. We support Ofcom's call to tech companies to play their part in addressing the risks of online harm and recently met with them to discuss this important issue. The Ending Violence Against Women and Girls SBRI Challenge Fund has identified a number of innovative solutions for women and girls' safety, including challenging problematic behaviours online. There is currently a consultation that is out by Ofcom, specifically looking at protection of women and girls online. And I am pleased to have got confirmation in the last couple of weeks that a person has been successfully prosecuted under a Section 181 charge against me. That was sending messages by way of online communication conveying a threat of death or serious harm, and at the time of sending intended the individual, which was me, would be in fear that the threat would be carried out. So that is one of the more serious charges in that legislation. I am pleased that there has been a successful prosecution of that and that he will be sentenced very shortly.
Thank you, Minister. I call Owen Tennyson for a supplementary.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Deputy First Minister, for that answer. And may I express my solidarity, first of all, to you, Deputy First Minister, on the threat and abuse that you have received, and hopefully the individual in question will be held to account for that. Can I ask, Deputy First Minister, there has obviously been speculation that tech regulation and online safety regulation may be on the table as part of trade negotiations that the UK Government has undertaken with a number of countries. Do you agree that we should not sacrifice online safety regulation and the safety of women and girls online as part of those negotiations? And have you made representations to the UK Government to that effect?
Minister.
Thank you. The member will be aware of some recent announcements in relation to the UK-US trade agreement just announced last week. We're working through the details of that, but I know that many will be pleased to see that this rumoured aspect of that did not feature. The member will also be aware that for many years, myself, along with my colleagues, have advocated for stronger protections of women in particular, but of course we've seen in recent months threats and abuse of public representatives right across this House, men and women. We have raised before that there is a particular issue, as recognised by a number of reports, towards women in this particular incident, and I know that many of us get a significant amount of abuse, but in this particular case, with a specific allegation, a specific threat of death being communicated via communications, I am glad that that legislation was there. It is a good demonstration that the Online Safety Act can and will be used to successfully prosecute, and we await the sentencing of that. I think it is incredibly important that the courts do take these matters seriously as well, and this is an issue I think that unites all of us to stand shoulder to shoulder to say that it is absolutely wrong that there's abuse, threats and violence towards any public person, never mind elected representatives, just simply trying to do their job.
Call Harry Harvey for supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does the Deputy First Minister agree with me that it is completely unacceptable that any woman in public life should have fear of violence simply because they are doing their job?
Minister.
Look, absolutely. Women have a right to participate in public life without suffering abuse or threats of violence, and indeed we want to actively encourage women to get into public life. However, we sadly do know from personal experience, and we've heard the stories from many people, not just throughout this place but in other public roles as well, that women in public life are subjected to serious and sustained severe abuse on social media. It is not often that you can identify who that person is, or that threat may include a very specific act or threat of violence. But nevertheless, the abuse builds up, and we know that, and the negative impact, not just on those individuals, but of course in terms of the participation of women generally, women not wanting to be part of public life or to become a public representative due to this. So it is an important issue. It is there right at the heart of our strategy strategy of ending violence against women and girls. It's one of the many behaviours that takes place throughout that is based on those values, based on that prejudice, based on that misogyny, and it needs to be stamped out.
Thank you, Minister. I call Cara Hunter.
Speaker, and I just want to put on record my solidarity and support for you, Deputy First Minister, and no one should have to face any kind of threat just when doing their job, so just to express my support for you in everything you're going through. Deputy First Minister, just following up from the initial question, recently at a discussion in the European Union Parliament, there was a suggestion that perhaps there could be a sort of a direct helpline when it comes to digital abuse, a 911 if you will. Do you think we should have something similar here in Northern Ireland, specifically to tackle misogynistic digital abuse?
Thank you. I thank the member for her sentiments and indeed her important question. And I think in all of this, of course, there's always a balance around free speech. There's always a balance in terms of people being able to, in any democracy, to freely express a view. But where that crosses over into abuse or to threats, that is clearly wrong. And I welcome the fact that it has been recognised that in order to deal with this, there needs to be a number of different tools, not just the offences and the new offences under the Online Safety Act, which we've seen in action already, but of course those aspects of that legislation which compels those social media and online companies to take action. That is why that consultation that is out at the moment by Ofcom is really important. It is open, I believe, until about the 23rd of May, and I would encourage members to respond to that, to tell of their own personal experiences and the types of issues that that guidance needs to cover, because that's going to be vitally important moving forward. I don't want any woman or girl to suffer abuse online. I certainly don't want it to get to the levels, of course, that that young person feels that they don't want to go into politics, or that a woman feels that they want to step back from frontline politics as well. So I think it's really important that we do tackle this, because it's important that that inclusion is there and that our public representative space is a safe one for people to be able to do what they need to do.
Call Sinead Annis for supplementary.
Pre-Laskin Corlan, can I too send solidarity to the Deputy First Minister and to everybody across this House indeed who's experienced abuse in the course of doing this role. It's completely unacceptable and needs to be called out. Can the Deputy First Minister provide an update on the Power to Change public awareness campaign, please?
Thank you. Yes, indeed. And in terms of the broader abuse, we know that that type of abuse causes significant distress. We know that it can make people very scared. I felt afraid. I continue to feel afraid in terms of looking to the future because of the actions of this individual. And I think that is just utterly wrong. I think all of us get into public life despite our differences of political opinions and aspirations. We all get into public life to try to make a positive difference, to do what we can, either to push forward an agenda we feel passionately about, or indeed to help the individuals that need that help and support in their individual cases. And I think it is just so fundamentally wrong that in trying to do that, that that we can suffer that abuse and certainly those threats, and to be put into a position of feeling fearful about that. But of course our strategy recognises that this behaviour starts at a much earlier stage. It starts at the point where, as I said, that those values, that those prejudices, that those opinions are formed. And that's why it is so important in terms of that campaign. That campaign is about encouraging people to be active bystanders, to call this out at the earliest possible opportunity. It's not a bit of a laugh. It's not just, oh, it's just a bit of this, that and the other. It's not. It represents a certain type of view, and it makes people very, very uncomfortable, and starts at a very early stage. And unfortunately what we often then see is that threat and violence and worse where that comes to a particular point. So look, I'm glad that the strategy deals with this in the broadest possible way, and this is an important campaign as part of that.
Thank you, Minister. I call Tom Buchanan.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Question number 2.
Minister.
The recent Supreme Court judgment on the For Women Scotland Limited and Scottish ministers ruled that for the purposes of the Equality Act 2010, the definitions of sex, man and woman, refer to biological sex. The issue is currently under consideration within the Department, and I'm aware it's under consideration right across. It is important to remember that this judgment is likely to have tangential and other impacts. It is likely to have an impact here in Northern Ireland. I have no doubt over the next number of weeks there will be much discourse, much debate, guidance and other things that will be issued. But of course it is also important that our public bodies and our departments and others do pay attention to this particular judgment and make sure that we are complying with the law.
Tom Buchanan for a supplementary.
Thank you, and thank the Minister for a response. Does the Deputy First Minister agree with me that it is fundamentally wrong and unfair that trans people who are biologically male have been able to compete in women's sports, use women's bathrooms and be placed on female prison wings?
Minister.
Thank you. I thank the member for his supplementary question. It is a very topical issue at the moment, and for understandable reasons. I do commend those who have campaigned on this issue, those that have been subject to a significant amount of abuse for trying to stand up and protect female spaces for women. In this debate, we always must be conscious that it should be carried out in a way which is not about offending anybody. Of course it's not. It's not about not recognising the existence of people or demeaning them, but this is about recognising biological reality. It is about recognising the right that women have to be protected within women-only spaces. It is about recognising, in my view, very, very strongly the fundamental unfairness that somebody who is born male would have in a sports team or sports arena. This is fundamentally common sense, and I think the vast majority of people out there do recognise that. They don't want this to be carried out in such a way to hurt or demean, but they do want the rights of women to be stood up for, and indeed to be implemented in a way that protects women, particularly in vulnerable spaces or where there would be a significant unfairness.
Matthew O'Toole for a supplementary.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Deputy First Minister, notwithstanding the outcome of the court case, and it is a court case which needs to be understood and acknowledged, there are ordinary trans people, including in this building today. They're having an event upstairs. Can I ask whether you, as Deputy First Minister, will make any attempt to reach out to people in the trans community who do, notwithstanding the outcome of the court judgment, feel anxious and frankly at times threatened by some of the language used in politics? Can I ask, will you specifically reach out to the trans community to ensure and assure them that they are esteemed and should be treated with proper respect? Is that something you would do?
Minister.
Thank you. I thank the member for his question. I can assure the member that I have engaged with the trans community on a number of occasions up until this point, and everything that I say, and I say this very, very clearly, everything that I say, I make clear that no person should be subject to harassment or to discrimination, and indeed that people should be attributed dignity. Of course they should. But it is in that space that I think it is only right. I feel very strongly about this issue, that personally speaking, this has been an issue which has been toxic. Those women who have taken a different view, for example from the trans lobby, have been subjected to vile abuse, to threats, death threats, threats of violence as well. That is wrong. There will be different views on this issue. I fundamentally believe it is a common sense approach that male and female relates to biological sex, and that in terms of the implementation of this, we must protect women in women-only spaces, and we should also ensure fairness, for example, when it comes to sport.
Jerry Carroll for supplementary.
Condemnation of threats towards yourself, Minister, and violence or threats towards violence of anybody is disgraceful and wrong, whoever that is. Minister, given that the BMA stated the Supreme Court ruling is biologically nonsensical and scientifically illiterate, do you think we should listen to the medical experts rather than foolishly follow the Supreme Court ruling here?
Minister.
Thank you. Let's be very clear, the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. They are the people who sit and make a judgment on these legal matters. But it is a matter of biology as well. A woman is a woman. I am a woman. I know what I am. And so with the greatest respect to the member, as I said, we can engage in this debate in a respectful way, but nevertheless there are very strong views on this, and those strong views should be respected. I have a strong view on this. Many women, and indeed people across society, have a strong view that the Supreme Court was correct, and we look forward to seeing that implemented in a way that of course does not harass or demean people, but does so in a way that protects women.
John Blair.
Speaker. If I could ask, if I may, that we move away from opinions and views to fact. And in light of that, could I ask what impact the clarity of the assessment with regard to the need for non-discrimination on the basis of gender reassignment will have on the work of the Executive Office regarding equality for all, including members of our trans community?
Minister.
Thank you. I thank the member for his question. As indicated in the initial response, these matters are under current consideration, but I think there is no doubt that legally speaking, it's not just a matter of opinion. Legally, looking at the Supreme Court judgment, it's very clear that there will be tangential impacts of this. There will be a significant impact of that judgment across many areas of operation within departments, agencies, arm's length bodies, etc. So, of course, there needs to be very clear guidance given in relation to the law. That is something that is a duty on each of the departments and bodies. I know there's been some reference to the Equality Commission or other bodies. Those can, of course, issue their own guidance, and we will look at that very carefully. But the legal position is the legal position, and therefore bodies and departments must make sure that they are complying factually and legally with what the Supreme Court has said. So we'll be looking at these issues very carefully.
Aoife Finnegan.
I want to thank the Minister for her answer. Could the Minister outline what protections currently exist for trans people here?
Thank you. Indeed, there are significant protections that remain in place for individuals from the trans community here. For individuals undergoing or having undergone gender reassignment, the Sex Discrimination Northern Ireland Order of 1976, as amended by the Sex Discrimination Gender Reassignment Regulations Northern Ireland 1999 and the Sex Discrimination Order 1976 Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2016. There's also protections within the Employment Equality Sex Discrimination Regulations of 2005. So there's quite a bit of protection there, as there is indeed across the UK. Of course, the judgment was referring to other legislation or other guidance that may refer to men or women without those specific interpretations set out in some of those other pieces of legislation. So there are protections there, and I can assure people that there are protections there. But this is about also protecting those places for women where women are particularly vulnerable, for example, or where there would be a significant or any unfairness in relation to inclusion.
Call Malisha McHugh.
Question number 3.
Minister.
Thank you. We are currently considering options for filling vacancies on the MLK Development Corporation Board. We do recognise that the vacancies place an additional burden on the remaining board members, and we are grateful to them for their continued efforts and commitment. We would be remiss to discuss the Maze Lawn site without mentioning the Balmoral Show, which will take place later this week from the 14th to 17th of May. It is truly a fantastic showcase for the region and indeed for our agriculture and agri sector, and we would encourage everyone to visit if at all possible. We would also like to highlight the fantastic work of the Ulster Aviation Society, who, as members may well be aware, recently brought the Spitfire replica to Parliament buildings just last week as part of the commemoration and celebrations of 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. The UAS attend a variety of shows and events, but of course members of the public can arrange to visit the collection in the hangars, and I would genuinely encourage people to do so. They really have a remarkable collection at the site, so it's a really good day out.
Malisha McHugh for supplementary.
I
thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer.
Detail for me what is currently happening with the retained and listed buildings on this site.
As a member is likely aware, the listed and retained buildings, there's an obligation in terms of maintenance, and that is what continues at this stage.
I call David Honeyford for supplementary.
Well, Deputy Speaker, the role of the Maze Lawn Board is there to deliver the development of the whole site. You've mentioned the Ulster Aviation and Balmoral Show, which are great examples of what can happen, but we've also heard our Deputy First Minister talk about sensitivity, but that shouldn't mean doing nothing. When will the Deputy First Minister enable progress that will see the board being able to fulfil their job?
Minister. Thank you. I thank the member for his question. He will be aware that I have a local constituency interest in the site as well. Look, I think the site has huge potential. I would love to see the economic potential in particular unlocked about that site. The member will be aware that there is no agreement, alas, that until there is agreement in relation to the listed and retained buildings, the then Deputy First Minister Martin McGuinness had set down that there would be no further development above and beyond what had already been agreed. There was a subsequent agreement to allow for the air ambulance to be located on that site, and I welcome that particular agreement. But at this stage, yes, that issue has stopped that economic and other potential of the site, and of course I would appeal to my colleague in the Executive Office, but also to others, to use a pragmatic approach to allow some of that potential to be realised in the meantime, while we continue to take a look at some of those other tricky issues.
Stephen Dunn.
Thank you, Speaker. Will the Deputy First Minister join me in noting the very positive contribution that large-scale events like the Balmoral Show, Northwest 200 and the Open Championship coming up at Royal Portrush has in showcasing the very best of Northern Ireland and the impact that has?
Look, absolutely. I thank the member for his timely question. I was at the Northwest 200 just on Saturday. I know that the First Minister was there on Thursday evening, which I believe was her first time at the Northwest, and it was really a spectacular occasion. I think over 100,000 spectators there enjoying the sunshine for a second Saturday in a row on the Northwest. It really brings the spectators out. But my goodness, what a showcase of our wonderful North Coast through that event. And indeed, events like that, it's not just in terms of spectators, the riders, the participants here in Northern Ireland, and I've no doubt that the Open and other events like the Balmoral Show, like the VE Day celebrations of last week, that these showcase our fantastic offering here in Northern Ireland. There will be millions of people all over the globe watching the Northwest 200. There will be millions of people all over the globe watching the Open this summer, and they're seeing our beautiful coastline, they're knowing about Northern Ireland, and we hope that they will go, well look, I'm interested in finding out more, and that's a real opportunity for us to attract those tourists or to attract that investment and that business. It's a unique aspect of what we can offer, and we should be using every opportunity to really promote Northern Ireland.
Before I call Paul through, can I remind members and indeed the Deputy First Minister that all answers need to be related to the question? So you're going to have to repeat yourself in question 5, okay? So can I call Paul through, please?
Number 4.
Minister. Thank you. The Victims Payment Board, which makes decisions on entitlement to payment through the Victims Payment Scheme, has advised that the inclusion of postcode information when applying is not mandatory. This means that there are a large number of applicants who do not provide this data, which means it's not possible to use the board's IT system to get a breakdown of successful applications by constituency. A manual review of applications would be required to retrieve this information. I have communicated, though, I believe that this would be useful information, particularly in terms of the planning of services, and to communicate that with the Department of Health as well, because we know that there are many people coming forward to the board and they haven't been diagnosed with particularly in the mental health side, those conditions before. So again, this would be really useful in terms of the planning of those support services that we had that data. But as outlined, it's very challenging at the moment to try to extract that from the system. But as of the week commencing the 28th of April 2025, there have been more than 11,000 applications submitted to the scheme. There have been a total of 3,204 determinations made, resulting in more than 89 million being paid to eligible applicants since the scheme opened for applications.
Thank you. I call Paul Free for supplementary.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Deputy First Minister. Maybe the reason why we can't get that data is the real fear and concern that some victims have over the terrorist threat. Does the Deputy First Minister agree with me that the crass and hurtful glorification of terrorism by the First Minister goes against the Code of Conduct for Ministers, goes against the spirit of peace and reconciliation, and makes a nonsense of the claim to be a First Minister for all?
Minister.
I thank the member for his question. The First Minister, of course, is answerable for her own activities, but I can say very clearly to this place that I believe that any glorification of terrorism is wrong. Of course, families may want to remember their loved one and can do so privately. Of course, that is understandable. But the public glorification of those that have been convicted of terrorist activities, in my view, is absolutely wrong. It has no part to play. It never had any part to play in Northern Ireland, and it certainly has no part to play in our future. And I would like us all to be able to stand absolutely united against paramilitarism, intimidation, threats, and indeed any glorification of the same.
Justin McNulty for supplementary.
First Minister, I know your colleague, the other First Minister, believes that the violence, the horrendous violence and futile violence of the past, and her party believes the same thing, that was justified. Do you believe that it's justifiable that many of the victims of that violence are languishing in pain, unable to access the the permanent pensions disablement scheme, and are suffering in pain and suffering with impairment, both physically and mentally? Is that justifiable?
Minister.
Thank you, and I thank the member for his important question, because of course I've met also with many of those who have applied to this scheme, many of those that had been severely injured or have those permanent mental scars from what they experienced during the Troubles. That's what the scheme is designed to try to support. I am pleased to say that I was very much involved in the support of this scheme right throughout, and in pushing the UK Government at a time that this place wasn't sitting to try to ensure that that legislation was brought forward. And I'm on the record at Westminster on really pushing this issue. As outlined in the initial answer, this situation is very complex. At least 1 in 3 of the cases that come forward to the Pensions Board include multiple incidents. Much of that data is historic data. It is across records kept over many decades, and unfortunately that is taking time to achieve. However, I am pleased to say that when you look at the amount paid out in 2023 and 24, it was around the 24 million mark, but in 24-25 that has increased to in and around £46 million being put out. That is almost a double of what went out in the previous year, and I think that's a very good indication that the processing of these is speeding up and money is getting out, with almost £90 million now being paid out to give that essential support to those who have suffered the most during the Troubles.
Thank you. I call Paula Bradshaw.
First Minister, for your answer so far. Just on that issue of the processing it, I'm sure you'll agree with me that the voluntary sector organisations who have been providing support with applications have been doing an amazing job. But just once the application then is submitted to the board, how often are you reviewing that process, and are there any changes planned for the future to make it easier for applicants? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you. And yes, look, we've recently met with the chairperson of the board to talk through these issues and to be assured that they are continuously reviewing their system. There's been a number of significant changes that you will be aware from your role on the committee, that the business improvement programme has been implemented in terms of the key strands that came about following the recent innovation and consultancy services review. So that looked at all kinds of things, including the improvement of IT systems, an attempt to avoid duplication, trying to give that additional support, because of course we're working within the health trusts, with GP practices, with the PSNI, with many of those legacy files. That all requires very often a manual application of trying to find and to gather that information. That inevitably leads to delays. There is a significant number of applications, over 11,000 that have come through, so understandably it has been a very logistically challenging thing, but nevertheless we want people to get that support as quickly as possible, so we will be continuing to work closely with them, as our officials do as well, to try to do everything in our power to get this sped up as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I call Maurice Bradley.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Question 5.
Thank you. I thank the member for his question. We promoted the Open during a visit to North Carolina as an example of Northern Ireland's attractiveness as a location for golf, for major events, for investment and for tourism. I further highlighted the Open during my visit to Washington DC. Hosting the Open featured in speeches at the Northern Ireland Bureau Breakfast in Washington DC, where the claret jug was on display for the 250 guests and media outlets. While I was in DC for St Patrick's Day, a number of people mentioned Rory McIlroy to me, so what an incredible export that we have, that he is an internationally, of course, recognisable name, but also that he is recognisably from Northern Ireland and the promotion opportunities around all of that, as of course our sports people do right throughout many of our sports. I want to put on record once again our congratulations to him on this magnificent victory and completing his career Grand Slam. People across the entirety of Northern Ireland are incredibly proud of Rory and what he has achieved. And what I don't think we could have imagined a better setup for the 153rd Open Championship at Royal Portrush, which will be the largest ever sporting event held in Northern Ireland, broadcasting a stunning beauty and hospitality around the world. It's one of the most prestigious events in the global sporting calendar, attracting international business leaders, investors, tourism stakeholders and global media. It is predicted to generate more than 213 million in total economic benefit for Northern Ireland.
I call Maurice Bradley for a supplementary.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answers. The Open has previously given a significant economic boost to Northern Ireland. How can we ensure that we build on this and maximise the economic benefits of the Open this year? And I'd like to thank the members for their praise of the events in the North Coast, the Open, the North West 200, Super Cup, NI, etc. And we ask the members to recognise that on those days there are over 100 to 200,000 people in the area, with the nearest hospital being the Altnagelvin in Londonderry.
Sorry, run out of time.
Apologies.
Okay. So that ends the period for listed questions. We'll now move on to 15 minutes of topical questions. Topical question 5 has been withdrawn. I call on Matthew O'Toole.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Deputy First Minister, you mentioned in your remarks that the importance of showcasing things and visiting things, and you've certainly, along with your colleague, made a habit of visiting things. You mentioned North Carolina, you mentioned Washington DC, you mentioned the Northwest 200. But when I looked at the TO website, I found that in terms of announcements, it's been more than 2 months since there's been a substantive policy announcement from your department. That was the appointment of a commissioner, or the beginning of a competition on the appointments commissioner. Can I ask, Deputy First Minister, what is it that you and the First Minister actually spend your day doing?
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure whether to thank the member for that question or not, but nevertheless, I will answer it. Of course, we're hugely busy in terms of what we're trying to drive forward, and that is an ambitious programme for change right across the executive. Thus far, in the 14-15 months that we have been in post, we have secured agreement, unanimous agreement as well, in terms of the executive in a programme for government, the first to be agreed in well over a decade. We've secured agreement in terms of the transformation programme and the spending of that money. We secured agreement in the executive to the budget and key reform aspects moving forward. We have gained agreement in terms of the establishment of a new AI unit, in relation to the establishment of a delivery unit. We have been working on all of these things because we are committed to doing things differently and driving forward that change. Yes, a significant part of our role is also being out there representing Northern Ireland, championing Northern Ireland, showing our support to those great organisations and events. But I can assure the member that we are continuing to work hard to drive forward that progress against those 9 key priorities as set out in our agreed programme for government.
Matthew O'Toole for a supplementary.
Deputy First Minister, I appreciate that you have secured agreement to a programme for government on the budget. Those are the bare minimum that any government should do. What I think most people watching politics here have seen is your party, probably with the happy acquiescence of your partners in government, Sinn Féin, deliver nothing but inaction, but rather turn politics here into one long, old, firm game. First Minister, Deputy First Minister, people here, particularly young people, want more than endless rows over signs and statues. So can I ask whether you think that you and the First Minister, given all the money you've spent on travel, are providing value for money for the public in Northern Ireland?
Thank you, Deputy Principal Speaker. I think it's an absolute nonsense to say that there hasn't been that delivery and commitment to driving through. And quite frankly, I would say to the young people of Northern Ireland that they're sick of negativity. They're sick of people trying to put a spin on things because you want something to oppose. This is an executive that has delivered a programme for government. It has ambitions. It's got 9 key priorities. We've already seen the announcements about our actions to tackle waiting lists that could only be done because this is an executive that prioritised and ring-fenced funding to tackle waiting lists. From our own executive office, in terms of the priority on ending violence against women and girls, we not only produced the strategy, we produced the framework, and money is already out the door, and with organisations, campaigns have already been running. There is a series of actions that are taking place. I'm sorry that the member hasn't focused on those, or perhaps is unaware of those, because I can assure you very, very strongly, we have not been focusing on some of those other issues that your party have been focused on in terms of trying to find wedge issues. We have been focusing on driving forward progress in this place and making Northern Ireland work.
Excuse me. See, before I call the next member, I couldn't even hear half your response because your party colleagues hearing in the background. Okay, so could you not get in the head? It's not cute. And the same for the opposition. Andrew, you will be heard.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Deputy First Minister. As a representative of South Down, I've seen the growth of the film industry within Northern Ireland, namely in some of the stunning site locations that we have in South Down due to the landscape. But can I ask what engagement there has been to mitigate the impact of potential US tariffs on the Northern Ireland film industry?
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you. Thank the member for his question. I, for one, I'm glad of the support behind me, but nevertheless, I can say that the film industry in Northern Ireland is really genuinely fantastic, and both the First Minister and I have had the opportunity on many occasions to promote that industry. It is a key part of our offering. We have invested heavily in that, including through the city region deals, of course with Studio Ulster, for example, opening in mid-June of 2025. So of course we were concerned to hear that there was a potential of tariffs on the film industry. We do have a number of US investments in terms of our creative industries, and we would want that to continue. Of course, it's not the only aspect of that. There are many other countries that we're engaging with in terms of trying to get production of those in Northern Ireland. We'll continue to do so. But yes, we have been raising this. We raised this just last week to the Business Secretary of State, Jonathan Reynolds, to just flag that we are concerned about this. There's no details as yet as to how that would actually operate, and I think most people agree it would be very difficult to implement that type of tariff on that type of thing. But of course we will be vigilant about this, and we'll be doing everything in our power to make sure that people are aware of the importance of that sector for Northern Ireland, and that we are mitigating against that at every opportunity.
Andrew McMurray for supplementary.
Thank you, First Minister, or Deputy First Minister. When will an international relations strategy be published, taking into account the specific needs of the film industry as a source of not just economic growth, but also cultural output?
Minister.
Thank you. Yes, we're at an advanced stage in relation to the international relations strategy. He will, of course, appreciate that there has been a number of global events that have taken place, not least the change of a president in the United States, and that brought with it a very different direction in terms of the global environment, particularly in relation to foreign direct investment and what we'd be targeting. We have to be acutely aware of those changes and make sure that our international relations strategy is therefore fit for purpose in that context. So we're taking all of those things into account. It's still a very unclear picture as to where we will land internationally in terms of the global trade situation and tariff situation. But of course we will take all of that into account, and we'll be shortly bringing forward our international relations strategy.
Thank you. I call John Stewart.
The Deputy First Minister for answers so far. Deputy First Minister, to return to the Troubles Permanent Disabled Pension Scheme, can you just confirm what is being done to promote that scheme in GB for either people who were injured here in Northern Ireland and moved across, or who were injured at the hands of terrorists while living in GB at the time? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you. Yes, I'm pleased to say that there have been efforts made to promote that, including using online sort of social media messaging, targeting newspapers or other places where there is likely to be people from here or those that may have been impacted by the Troubles. In Northern Ireland, of course, in February of 2024, a leaflet was put out through every door to raise awareness of that. So we are confident that there's very wide awareness of that scheme here in Northern Ireland. But there have been a significant number of applications from GB. Indeed, as I understand, the last time I looked, I think it was just over 500 applications from GB. So I think it's clear that the message is getting through. But of course, we do encourage those that have been physically or mentally injured during the Troubles to come forward and make sure that they're getting the benefit of that scheme.
John Stewart for supplementary.
And thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer. You highlight a number there, Minister. I know in a recent question response between the 1st of February 2024 and the 1st of February this year, the scheme received 178 applications from people from England, Scotland and Wales, with 3,900 from here in Northern Ireland. I'm just wondering, do those figures bear out the fact that maybe more could be done to highlight the scheme in GB and try to make sure that everyone who was affected is aware of it and eligible to apply?
Minister.
Thank you. Absolutely, I think we would be keen for that. I think it's important to remember as well that this is a scheme that comes from the Northern Ireland Block Grant, and our block grant primarily is there to benefit the people of Northern Ireland. But we recognise that there are many, many hundreds, if not thousands, on the mainland that have been impacted both physically and psychologically by the Troubles. Many of those who served, for example, in the armed forces where that support wasn't there for them at the time. We have been on ongoing engagement with the UK government around a financial contribution to this scheme. I believe very strongly that it makes sense that those based in GB are able to come forward to this scheme instead of GB having to set up a separate scheme with all of the administration cost that would bring. But if we are to do that and we're to increase those applications from GB, then I think the UK Government should step up and make that contribution towards the cost of that, which is likely to be significant. Fundamentally, we want everybody to get the support that they need, but there is an important aspect of this which is about funding and funding fairness.
Thank you. I call Deborah Erskine.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank the Deputy First Minister for her answers today. In June 2021, the then First Minister and the Deputy First Minister made a public commitment at Lisnaskea High School site for the redevelopment, which would include capital build projects for Lisnaskea Health Centre, an Irish Medium School and Innocent Victims Group South East Fermanagh Foundation. We know the health centre is underway and we welcome that. So does the Deputy First Minister agree that these projects are important for the Lisnaskea area and that there continues to be that commitment to these projects in Fermanagh?
Minister.
Thank you. I thank the member for an important question. Certainly I am fully supportive of that project. I think it's a fantastic project. It's a project that brings together some of the statutory services in terms of the health centre, the education in terms of the school, but also importantly that community sector, and really would breathe new life onto that site in a genuinely shared way. I think it is a fantastic project that perhaps in the past has suffered from the fact that there's not a dedicated fund there to support it, but there ought to be. These types of shared initiatives, opening up these spaces, giving them a new use, but a new use which is genuinely about every part of our society and community being able to come in and use that, I think is a great thing. Certainly the then First Minister and Deputy First Minister were more heavily involved in it than I was. I was a special advisor at the time. But we have been looking at trying to get a capital scheme as part of our Victims and Survivors Service, in recognition that many of our victims, fantastic victims and survivors groups, have capital buildings that were funded perhaps at a time through peace funding or other funds, but that's some considerable time ago. And I think there is a need to make sure that those premises are disabled accessed and now fit for purpose in terms of moving forward. So that is something that's under active consideration within the Executive Office at the moment.
Thank you. Deborah Erskine for a supplementary.
And I thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer there. She will know that it's not just about capital for innocent victims groups like SAFE, and SAFE do a vast amount of work in supporting innocent victims and helping them through the justice process. The justice process can be arduous and difficult, particularly for innocent victims. However, would the Deputy First Minister agree with me that access to justice is important for innocent victims? The door must not be closed to them, and we must ensure that justice is not denied, particularly that the system does not become a two-tier system.
Minister. Look, absolutely. Far too many, thousands of people in this place have never had justice for the injury or death of their loved one. That is an absolute tragedy. It is those people who have suffered most during the Troubles, and it is those people that we need to really help and support now. Certainly, personally speaking, and certainly from my party perspective, we've always been very, very clear that we oppose amnesty, that everyone should have the right and opportunity for justice. And I do, personally speaking, feel very apprehensive that the message being sent to many innocent victims in particular is that there's a two-tier approach where one body is good enough for them, but it's not good enough for others. And I think it's incredibly important that there's not a hierarchy of victims, that that two-tier approach does not continue, and that everyone has the right to access to the same justice. The death of their loved one, no matter who it was that killed that person, the death of their loved one matters just as much to that family. That person's life matters just as much as the next person's life, and therefore the opportunity for justice and the structures to get that should be the same for those victims and survivors. And for those who have truth, those people should come forward and give those people that closure.
Topical question 5 has been withdrawn. I call Peter McReynolds.
Deputy First Minister, what response has the Executive Office given to the National Audit Office report on asylum seeker contracts published in recent days?
Minister.
Thank you. I thank the member for his question. He will be aware that the Prime Minister has made a statement this morning around a number of actions in relation to immigration, refugee and asylum issues. This is not a devolved issue, but he will be aware that the Executive Office liaises with the Home Office in terms of the distribution of funds and their activities in Northern Ireland, including in relation to hostel, hotel and other accommodation issues. There are concerns, I have to say, in terms of the way the likes of Mears or other companies have operated in Northern Ireland. We have articulated those concerns. I've certainly articulated those concerns directly to the Minister of State responsible for that. I understand that those concerns are indeed shared across the UK in terms of the operation of some of those companies. It is a challenge, there's no doubt about that, and we will continue to work on these issues and indeed to respond to a number of the meetings that we'll be having in the next number of weeks as we look into all of these matters.
Very quickly, Peter, for supplementary.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. On that basis, Deputy First Minister, given the costs are 4 times higher than originally envisaged, and broadly the accommodation is unfit for purpose, what update do you have for us today in this House about the publication of the Refugee Integration Strategy and when that will be published?
Thank you. Yes, the Executive has agreed the Refugee Integration Strategy will be very shortly published, but I can assure the member that there have been concerns that have been shared. I have particular concerns, I have to say, about the lack of transparency in terms of the data and the information coming from Home Office and from their organisations. That needs to change. People do need to know what is happening and exactly where it is happening, and we'll continue to push on that issue. I have raised it directly with the Minister of State.
To the Minister for Education, and we'll start with a list of questions. Question 6 and question 14 have been withdrawn.